You ever get this feeling like the world's throwing us a few too many curveballs these days?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's like every time you turn on the news, there's another disaster somewhere.
And it's not just the sheer number of them, it's the kind of disasters we're seeing too. They're complex, they're hitting harder.
And they never seem to be straightforward situations. It's never just one thing, right?
Exactly.
Which is why being prepared for mass casualty incidents, these big chaotic events, it's more important now than ever.
Absolutely.
But let's be honest, nobody wants to sit through another boring lecture or flip through a dusty old binder to learn how to handle a crisis. So today we're doing something a little different. We're diving deep into the world of MCI preparedness, but we're ditching the old school methods and exploring the really cool stuff.
We're talking cutting-edge tech, innovative training that's actually changing the game.
Okay, so before we get to the really exciting stuff, the tech and simulations and all that, I need you to set the stage for us a bit.
Sure.
Why is there such a push for these new training methods? I mean, we know disasters are becoming more frequent, right? I read somewhere that in 2019 alone, over 95 million people were affected by disasters globally.
Wow.
It's a crazy number. But is it just about the frequency, or are there other factors at play here?
It's definitely more than just the numbers, although that is alarming in itself. Disasters are becoming increasingly complex, right? We're seeing events that combine different hazards, like you might have a hurricane
Right.
that triggers flooding, which then leads to outbreaks of disease. You're dealing with a domino effect.
That's a scary thought.
It really is.
Yeah.
And these complex situations demand a whole new level of preparedness.
So where do the traditional training methods fall short?
So traditional methods like lectures and tabletop exercises, while they're definitely valuable for building foundational knowledge,
Sure.
they don't really prepare someone for the chaos and the stress of an actual MCI.
It's like you can read a driver's manual cover to cover,
Right.
but that doesn't mean you're ready to get behind the wheel in a real-life situation, especially if the conditions are bad.
Exactly. You need that hands-on experience.
Yeah.
And that's where these innovative training methods come in. They bridge the gap between theory and reality. They give first responders a safe space to practice crucial skills, like decision-making under extreme pressure.
So we're basically talking about giving them the closest possible experience to the real thing, but without the real-world risks.
Exactly. We can run simulations, we can throw in unexpected challenges, we can really push them to their limits.
And through all of that, they learn and adapt.
They come out the other side better prepared, more confident, and ultimately more effective when it really matters.
So ready to dive into some of these cutting-edge training methods?
Let's do it.
I think it's safe to say we're all a bit into the whole sci-fi thing here.
Always fun to geek out a little.
And some of these technologies we're going to talk about today, VR, AR, those are practically straight out of science fiction, right?
Yeah, but the difference is we're not just talking about entertainment anymore. We're talking about using these tools to train for real-life situations, like MCIs.
And that's where it gets really interesting. But before we go full-on futuristic,
Yeah.
let's start with something that sounds, well, deceptively low-tech. 3D tabletop exercises. So tell me, how are these different from, just gathering around a table with a map and some coffee?
Think of it this way. Imagine you're doing a traditional tabletop exercise. You're discussing a hypothetical earthquake, let's say, and its aftermath. Now imagine that entire scenario brought to life in 3D right there on the table.
Okay, so instead of just talking about a collapsed building,
Right,
you're looking at a detailed model of it.
exactly. You're seeing the layout, the potential hazards where victims might be trapped. It adds a whole new dimension to the training.
So it's interactive. You're not just sitting back observing.
You're not just armchair quarterbacks, no.
Yeah.
You can manipulate elements of the model,
Mhm.
test different response strategies, see how your decisions play out in a more visual, tangible way.
That makes sense. If you can actually visualize the situation so clearly,
Yeah.
you're going to be better equipped to make quick, informed decisions under pressure. And in a real MCI, those split-second decisions can be life or death.
Absolutely. And the research backs this up. There was one study that found 3D tabletop exercises improved decision-making skills by something like 30% compared to traditional tabletop exercises. That's huge.
Wow. Okay, so we're definitely not talking about child's play here.
No, not at all. This is serious stuff.
All right, so let's level up the tech a bit. Let's talk about virtual reality, VR. Now, this one has really captured the public imagination lately.
Yeah, it's definitely having a moment.
But how are we using it to train for something as intense as an MCI?
Picture this.
Yeah.
You put on a VR headset, And suddenly you're transported from a sterile training room to the middle of a disaster zone.
Okay, now that's what I'm talking about.
You're surrounded by the sights and sounds of a mass casualty incident. There's chaos. There are injured people calling for help.
So you're really thrown right into the thick of it.
Exactly. And because it feels so real, your brain processes it differently than if you were just reading about it in a textbook.
Your body goes into that fight or flight mode even though you know it's a simulation.
Exactly. It's controlled stress, controlled exposure.
Like they say,
Right.
train how you fight.
Exactly. And when it comes to MCIs, being comfortable in those high-pressure situations can make all the difference.
Have they done studies on how effective this kind of training actually is?
Oh, yeah. There have been a bunch of studies showing that VR training leads to significant improvements in situational awareness, decision-making, even teamwork among first responders.
That's really impressive. So we're not just talking about a cool tech demo here. We're talking about a tool that's actually moving the needle on MCI preparedness.
Exactly. VR is proving itself as a legitimate training tool for high-stress situations.
Okay, so from the virtual world, let's move to something that blends a bit more with reality. Augmented reality, or AR.
Okay.
We all remember the Pokemon Go craze a few years back, but I have a feeling that AR in MCI training is a little more serious.
Definitely a bit more serious than catching virtual creatures. But you're on the right track. It's all about overlaying critical information onto the real world right in front of you.
So it's like a heads-up display for first responder.
Exactly. Think about it. Paramedics arrive at a chaotic scene. With AR glasses, they could see patient vitals projected right onto their field of view, or building blueprints, highlighting potential hazards, maybe even step-by-step instructions for complex procedures.
Wow, that's incredible.
No more fumbling with maps or manuals in the middle of a crisis. It really changes the game.
I imagine that would be especially helpful for something like triage.
Exactly. In a mass casualty incident, being able to quickly and accurately assess the severity of injuries is crucial.
It can literally mean the difference between life and death for some people.
And there was a pilot study done recently where AR-enhanced triage training led to a 25% improvement in accuracy.
That's huge. And it's not just theoretical, it's actually making a difference.
It's one thing to talk about the possibilities, but seeing those real-world results, even in a pilot study, it's really exciting.
Okay, this is all incredible stuff, but we haven't even touched on what I think is the most fascinating. Mixed reality. This one sounds like we're really stepping into the future.
It is pretty wild. You're essentially taking the best of both worlds, VR and AR, and you're blending them together.
Okay, so it's like a hybrid approach, right? You're getting the immersion of VR,
Yeah,
but you're also able to interact with real-world elements.
precisely. It allows for an incredible level of realism and interaction.
Can you give us an example? How would this play out in, say, an MCI training scenario?
Okay, so picture a training room that's been transformed into a simulated disaster zone, right?
Yeah.
But this time, it's not just a visual representation. With mixed reality, the participants can interact with both physical and virtual elements in real time.
So they could be, say, moving through a physical obstacle course like they would in a real disaster.
Yeah.
But they're also encountering virtual victims, virtual hazards, things like that.
Exactly. They might need to physically apply a tourniquet to a simulated wound while receiving virtual feedback on their technique.
Wow.
Or maybe they have to collaborate with other trainees to virtually extricate a victim trapped under some debris. It becomes a very collaborative experience.
That's incredible. And it sounds incredibly engaging for the trainees.
Oh, absolutely. It takes that concept of hands-on training to a whole new level.
And does the research suggest that it's effective?
It's still early days for MR in MCI training, but early findings suggest that it has huge potential.
Especially, I would imagine, when it comes to teamwork and communication, because in the chaos of a real MCI, being able to communicate clearly and work together seamlessly, that's essential.
And that's something that MR really allows you to practice in a controlled environment. It replicates that pressure of needing to communicate clearly, to delegate tasks, to work as a team, even when things are chaotic around you.
This is truly fascinating stuff. It sounds like these innovative training methods aren't just about improving individual skills, they're about enhancing the performance of the entire response team.
Absolutely. It's about creating a more coordinated, more effective response to whatever disaster might strike.
Wow, we've covered some seriously impressive tech today.
It's amazing to see how far things have come.
It really is. We've gone from textbooks and lectures to immersive simulations that feel like something out of, well, a sci-fi movie. But with all this amazing tech, all this progress,
Yeah.
what's the big takeaway here for our listeners? Why should they care about this whole evolution in MCI training?
I think it boils down to this. Better training means better preparedness, right?
Makes sense.
And better preparedness means lives saved, communities protected, just a more resilient response to whatever comes our way.
That's a powerful point. It's easy to get caught up in the wow factor of the technology itself,
Right.
but at the end of the day, it's about the real-world impact.
Exactly. These innovative methods, they're not just bells and whistles. They're about giving first responders the skills, the confidence they need to navigate the chaos of a real MCI.
And it's not just about what they learn, it's about how they learn it, right? I mean, our brains don't always know the difference between a truly immersive simulation and a real-life experience. So by training in these environments, they're essentially hardwiring those critical skills, preparing their minds and bodies to react effectively under pressure, even when it feels real.
Exactly. And that kind of preparation can be the difference between a successful outcome and a tragic one. It's that crucial.
Absolutely. But I imagine it's not all virtual reality and augmented reality rainbows, right? There have got to be some challenges in implementing these cutting-edge technologies. What are some of the hurdles?
Well, as with anything new, cost is always a factor.
Sure.
This technology, it can be a significant investment up front, and not all healthcare systems, especially not all training facilities, have the resources to just jump in with both feet.
Especially those in smaller towns or rural areas, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that ties into the other big challenge, accessibility. We need to make sure these training opportunities are available to everyone on the front lines of healthcare, not just big urban hospitals.
Absolutely. Everyone deserves access to the best possible training, regardless of where they work.
100%.
And even with all the fancy tech in the world,
Yeah,
a training program is only as good as its design, right?
you're hitting the nail on the head. Technology is just a tool. And like any tool, it needs to be used effectively to get the results you want. The success of these training programs depends on having a really solid plan, clear learning objectives, and ongoing evaluation to make sure it's actually working, that people are learning what they need to learn.
So it's not enough to just throw a VR headset on someone and call it a day.
Nope, not at all.
It takes effort.
It takes collaboration. You need the tech developers, the instructional designers, and of course the healthcare professionals, all working together to make sure these programs are relevant, effective, and accessible.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of MCI training, what's the final thought you want to leave our listeners with?
I guess if I could leave people with just one thing, it's that the future of MCI preparedness is bright. We're making incredible strides with training technology, and we're only going to get better at it.
I like the sound of that.
As these technologies keep evolving and become more accessible, we can look forward to a future where our first responders are better equipped than ever before to handle whatever comes their way.
A future where they have the skills and the confidence to face even the toughest situations. It's a future worth striving for.
Couldn't said it better myself.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive. Catch you next time when we take another deep dive into a whole new, fascinating topic.